during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
Hakeem Jeffries responded to Byron Donalds' comment comparing Democratic actions to Jim Crow by emphasizing the historical context and significance of such comparisons. Jeffries highlighted the severity and real impact of Jim Crow laws, which involved systemic racial discrimination and violence, and he suggested that invoking such a comparison diminishes the true horrors of that era. He also reiterated the importance of understanding history accurately to ensure informed and respectful discourse on current issues.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. I yield back.
Now, Byron Donalds clarified his comments about the comparison to Jim Crow laws by explaining that his intention was to highlight what he sees as the overreach and hypocrisy of the Democratic Party's policies. Donalds criticized the use of race-related rhetoric by Democrats, especially President Biden, arguing that such references are inappropriate and diminish the historical severity of Jim Crow laws. He stated that his remarks were meant to underscore the importance of fair and legal elections and to push back against policies like the For the People Act, which he believes would harm the integrity of the electoral process. If you haven't seen the video, here it is.
I grew up with my mom. My dad and my mom, things didn't work out. As an adult, I look at my father and I say, bro, I don't know what happened, but you my father and I love you.
Wow.
I don't know what happened. I wasn't there.
Wow.
But I'm gonna tell you this, growing up, the one thing I knew I wanted to do, and this is not about my father, this is about what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a father to myself.
Wow.
And so one of the things that's actually happening in our culture, which you're now starting to see in our politics, is the reinvigoration of black families with younger black men and black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people are always a bit conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth. I'm looking at my kids. How can my kids be on my shoulders when they take off in life? That's what's happening.
Abby Phillip confronted Byron Donalds on CNN about his comments comparing Democratic actions to Jim Crow laws. She expressed that such comparisons trivialize the brutal historical reality of Jim Crow and suggested that his remarks were irresponsible and misleading. Phillip aimed to highlight the severity of the Jim Crow era and why it's important not to draw inappropriate parallels to current political disagreements. Here's what he had to say.
I want to just focus on really the substance of what you were saying or trying to say in that clip. What did you mean by black families were more together during Jim Crow?
Frankly, what that is about the empirical fact that before the Great Society, before Lyndon Johnson's policies, there was more Black families united. The marriage rate in Black America was significantly higher before the Great Society. The period of time that coincides with that, obviously, is Jim Crow era. And then after the Great Society, the marriage rate in the Black community plummeted significantly. The Great Society is a part of that reason, not completely, but it's definitely a part of that. And what you're seeing right now in America is a reformation of Black families in America. That's a good thing, not only for the Black community and for Black families, but it's also a good thing for the country.
So what was the point of tying together the Black family and Jim Crow specifically? I mean, Jim Crow, as you know, was a period of racial segregation, of racial terror. Why would you make that connection?
All I was doing was referring to the time periods when you talk about the historical timelines in America and coinciding with Black families and what the marriage rate in Black families are. The overarching point is obviously talking about what polling shows today, that about 25% of the Black vote, depending on what poll you're looking at, is leaning towards supporting Republicans and supporting President Trump. The corollary to that is that when you're in a family unit, husband and wife, living together, working together, thriving together, you're raising your kids, your thought process is now talking about building generational wealth. What am I leaving to my children? What kind of communities do I want my children to come up in? What are the educational opportunities? What's going on with the economy? How does, and then to a broader level, how does foreign policy and all these other public policy issues flow into that? And so when you compare the terrible agenda of Joe Biden and what that's done to families in America, coinciding with the fact that you are seeing a reformation of Black families in America today, which is an absolutely wonderful thing and needs to continue. My view is it also coincides with a more conservative leaning and a more conservative mindset politically in those families.
One thing I really want to just get you to address is there were a lot of people who heard what you had to say, and a lot of them are offended by the idea that you would repeat Jim Crow 3 times in your comments as if to suggest that that was a time period because that Black families were, in your words, together, because, in your words, Black people were not just more conservative, they voted more conservatively. That's a good thing. I mean, it sounds like nostalgia. Do you regret using that time frame as a reference?
Nobody ever made nostalgia. That was never the point. It wasn't even about that. So where now I'm going to get my backup is I didn't say that. I didn't even insinuate that. That is where the media and yes, Hakeem Jeffries and a lot of other people are taking
What exactly didn't you insinuate?
No, back up.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. What didn't you insinuate?
The premise of your question, I did not insinuate. That is what people are trying to weave into what I said. What I said is crystal clear. It's on my social media. Go to @Byron Donalds on X. You can see the full clip. Abby, I appreciate you playing the full clip. What you are dealing with right now is a political environment where now anything I might say or any major surrogate might say is going to be twisted into the lens of race. That was never the point, not the idea whatsoever.
Just to clarify my questioning of you,
Sure.
I understand that this idea that you said it was better, you didn't use the words better. But when you talk about that time period, you're suggesting that because the Black family was together, they were better off than they are now.
See, this is the problem, Abby.
So are you saying that that's not the case? That the Black family was not better off when they were, in your words, together?
Abby, let me put it to you like this.
In the Jim Crow era.
Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. I know how to put words together. I do it very, very often. So I'm not going to say something that I do not agree with. What America is seeing right now, especially Black America, is the gaslighting that unfortunately does happen in politics, where you take my comments and you want to weave your own political viewpoint into what I said. What I said is very clear.
I asked you to explain because I wanted to, what I want to undo is understand what you're saying here. Because if you're making a comparison, You're saying the black family was together then, they're not together now, and you're using that to try to say that things are bad now. Well, first of all, let me just to set the table here. By pretty much every available measure, black families, black individuals in this country are better off today than they were during Jim Crow. Would you agree with that?
Abby, of course I would. I'm not making that point, and this is the problem. What the Democrats, what Hakeem Jeffries did on the House floor, what Jamie Harrison, what the president of the NAACP, what the Biden campaign, because they're the ones who started this, it was really the Biden campaigns who were trying to cherry pick everything. They're trying to twist my words into saying something. I never said that. What I was talking about was specifically black families. And the point that black families being together is a great thing for the black community. And you do have to acknowledge the empirical fact that before Lyndon Johnson's policies and the welfare state that was created in the United States, I'm not talking about good, bad, or indifferent.
What about,
black families were, black marriage rates were significantly higher.
Well, what about
They're
other
rising
things that
again
might
in
have,
America.
but,
That's a good
but
thing.
What
We should
about other
celebrate
things
that.
that may have contributed to the, maybe the decline in marriage rates, which, by the way, is not unique to black families. That's happening actually across racial groups. But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that had an effect on the black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies,
well,
that's what that was.
I know that
Abby, don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just,
Abby.
I have to correct on a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that, the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but I wanted to...
That's not totally true, Abby, and I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation, but
one of the other
Abby,
things,
do you want to have a conversation?
One of the other things,
I'm trying to understand how you want this
brought it
to
up,
go.
because since you brought it up on the conservative thing, the other thing that you said was black people voted more conservatively. Were you talking about them voting for Republicans?
In part, yeah, because that's just an empirical fact. That's what we know that did happen. And the only corollary that I am making is that when families are together and now you're trying to find a way for you to build wealth within your family unit, you're thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. Because at the end of the day, you want your children to be able to stand on your shoulders. I was very, very fortunate. My mother was able to build a platform for me to be able to stand on and to be able to achieve. Same for my sisters. I'm a very blessed individual because of that. My only point is that when you have a family unit, husband and wife living together, striving together, grinding together, raising children together, you start thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. And my belief is that dynamic allows people to start thinking about public policy in a much more conservative way as opposed to a much more progressive way. That's my point.
That might be, I think you're a Republican, so you're entitled to that opinion. But I think what people are taking issue with is you made a couple of statements of fact. And one of the things I was asking you about whether you were talking about black people voting for Republicans. In the time period that you're talking about, the LBJ time period, they started voting for Democrats. And the reason is because of civil rights, because a Democratic president was passing bills that gave them rights. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Housing Fairness Act. So do you acknowledge that when Democrats black voters vote for Democrats, it's actually because there's a history there. There's a reason that they voted for Democrats in that time period, not because they were just getting welfare money.
Abby, let me be clear. I don't deny that. I think it's also important for the record to be clear that you had the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate were filibustering the 64 Civil Rights Act led by Robert Byrd, who, by the way, was a mentor to Joe Biden when he went into the United States Senate.
So what are your thoughts on Donalds' comparison to Jim Crow? Were you offended by his comments? Do you think Donalds tried to backtrack or clarify his statement effectively? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you on the next video.